Bienvenidos. Welcome. You are tuned in to El Chalán Radio Spot. Hey, welcome everyone to El Chalán Radio Spot exclusives. This morning, of course, I am privileged to present this broadcast because of the amazing caliber of the story that is presented and what awaits. When I enticed into the idea of presenting a coffee chat on the French Missionaries, I was unaware of what an endeavor I was about to encounter and the amazing story that awaited in the discovery of what I discovered along the way. It took several months talking to several people and getting some insights, and once I heard about what it was going to take, I was like, who's going to be willing to come forward and present something? I'm already one of those guys that overposts everywhere and is not taking it serious. And so we on the Chalán Radio Spot are so fortunate because we have a passionate aunt named Rhonita Stubbs that is a passionate woman with an incredible memory and articulate and expressing herself. She decided to come forth and share some things. And within those some things, it turned into an amazing almost 2 hours of show. My recording session with her was about 3.5 hours. She kept her personal life to herself, but still shared it with me. And that is we'll get only some other areas for that, but I'm super thrilled. I went there and jaw dropped through so much of this story in fascination and disbelief of some of the things that happened and came together when we encounter the story of the missionaries to France, the French mission. Of course, this morning, the French Missionaries Coffee Chat. So anyways, with no further ado, I'm so privileged. Here we go. Here goes the opening.
William P. Tucker, or Bill, was considered one of the brightest minds of this generation. He graduated from the University of California at Los Angeles in 3 years and was a valedictorian. He made a new discovery in the science of genetics. He was made a professor at the same university, the UCLA, at age 23. Later, he was called to the French mission for the LDS Church. These notes were taken from someone speaking to Esther Spencer LeBaron, March 1976, on the road to Chihuahua City.
And with that, we open up and began to capture the story that shed light on the work, the contribution, and the legacy that the so-called French missionaries to France had with their lives, their contributions to the community, and them joining Joel's work here in Colonia LeBaron, who they were, who they married, and what happened. Welcome to an El Chalán Radio Spot exclusive. El Chalán mobilizes and invites the movers and shakers of the LeBaron community. Those who have story, those who inspire, those who bring forth positive change, who have set out and mobilized. Welcome to an El Chalán radio spot exclusive. Aunt Rhonita, can you give us a few details of some of the people here in the artwork of the picture as the French missionaries were coming back? How did they become connected to the Colonia LeBaron?
Wow. Okay. Through David Shore.
Okay.
David Shore was a missionary who left the mission field just as they were coming in, according to my understanding. And he joined them in some of their, I don't know if he gave them the set of, or saw that they got the set of journals of discourses, where they all studied in secret. They actually kept them hidden under their bed because it was not accepted in the Mormon church anymore.
They were trying to do.
And I think he helped. He was involved a little bit in that somehow, and he told them when he left that if he found anything that would verify these two higher offices, higher than the president of the church, he would send them the information on it.
Yes, and I guess you had commented that they had realized that the current LDS church was ignoring, cutting out, changing the order that Joseph Smith had established initially, ignoring the two offices.
The two higher offices,
And
the
then-
highest,
and so
above the president of the church.
Yeah, so they saw this change and they wanted to seek more about. Well, you tell me they were looking for the fullness of it.
The full picture, because they saw the scriptures in these very scriptures that they read talking about those two highest offices, and they said, where are they? They're not accepted or not acknowledged in the Mormon church today. The highest authority is the president of the church. At that time, it was David O. McKay. And they were searching for the rest of the story, a complete story of Joseph Smith's teachings and all those men who they read about in those journals of discourses.
Yes.
So David Shore left, saying that if he found anything that would add to that story, he'll send it to him.
Okay.
So he, as far as I remember, had this dream that there was this man with a cane handing out literature, handing out a pamphlet, and that he was supposed to accept one of those pamphlets when he saw that man.
Wow.
So later, after he was home, he went to Las Vegas, and in a parking lot, there he walked up to George L. Dockstetter, who had a cane and was handing out pamphlets, and that pamphlet was Priesthood Expounded. It had just been published. He was already a member of Joel's work, and he had helped write the Epistle to the Blind and see that it got out ahead of Priesthood Expounded, and it was a plea to the blind people who didn't see that there was those two higher offices, higher than the church.
Addressing the matter he was looking for.
Addressing that matter. And what those two higher offices were, that's what his Epistle to the Blind was about, covering the whole picture. So...
And let me ask you, what's his name, Dockspetter?
George L. Dockstetter.
George L. Dockspetter. And how was George L. Dockspetter? We run into the Dockspetter that Grandpa drove his wife's furniture.
Okay, it was his son, Theron Dockstetter, that father drove his wife, supposedly, that they put him in prison for driving his wife across the state line.
So that was his son, and this was his father that was giving out these pamphlets.
Yes. And he lived in St. George, Utah.
And he was associated with Joel?
Yes, by then he was. He had met Joel and become converted ahead of the French missionaries.
Interesting. So then what happens? He gets this pamphlet.
So David Shore gets this pamphlet, and he said, wow, here it is. Here's the whole story. I got to send this to Bill and the missionaries. So he sent it back to the mission field, and they ate it up.
Amazing.
And from then on, they knew that there was something more out there, and they wanted to go find the man who claimed that highest office.
And obviously they knew that the LDS Church had not
ignored
continued.
it.
Yeah, not continued in the
It was
fullness.
cut off at the neck, as far as they were concerned.
And then, so what happened? The picture that we have here for the cover, for the artwork of the show, this is them returning on a boat.
Yes, from that French mission, because as soon as they ate up, priested, expounded, and found the real doctrine that they were looking for, that couldn't imagine they'd ever find, and that there was a man on earth claiming that office, Joel LeBaron, they couldn't wait to go meet this man or go pursue the rest of their story. And from that time on, they started realizing that the Mormon Church wasn't what they had claimed and brought it.
But I guess they eventually become excommunicated. When did this happen?
So after they...
You said the church got wind of this.
Yeah. So the church got wind of, I mean, how could they hold it in? They were so excited about it. They were wanting to scream it from the rooftops, you know.
Wow.
And somehow word got back to the authorities that, hey, these are
becoming apostates.
This branch is a runaway branch. A runaway branch. Somebody better get over there and find out what's going on. So they sent their top authorities over to investigate and find out what was going on. And that's when they called them all in and checked and investigated each one of them and found out and claimed that Bill Tucker was the ringleader and that he was a devil from hell, and you could just see it in his eyes when you talked to him, and they separated him from all the rest of them and were trying to bring him in one at a time, hoping to save any lost sheep that they could that was falling away.
Wow.
And anyway, they had trials for them right then and there in Brussels or wherever it was. And the French missionaries, these that came home on the boat, stayed true to their convictions, went through terrible persecution at the time, knowing how it was break their parents' hearts and all the people that they'd done such a glorious job for.
Yeah, I hear that they had an amazingly successful mission.
So it brought in so many new members, like 400 times the amount that had been in previous years and previous missions into the LDS Church because of the spirit that they held in their teaching capacities. And they were guided by the Spirit. They were actually told, they prayed a lot, they fasted, they did all the things that the Bible says to do to have that Spirit with them. And they would go to an apartment building, and the Spirit would lead them to not the first floor or the second floor, but clear up to the third floor and lead them to which door to knock on, that there was someone waiting for their message.
Amazing story.
Just story after story, such faith-promoting stories. Anyway, that's the kind of team they were.
And then, so eventually, they all unite to come across, to get on a ship together.
Well, the ones who wouldn't be convinced to go stick with their mission and stay and be brought back into the fold were put on a ship and sent home.
Okay.
And they didn't know who was going to show up there, of them all, of their group. And, they were so happy to see each one that did.
And so they said, we're leaving this day. Whoever's going to join us to go meet Joel and get
the ship
go
is
back.
No, the ship is leaving to take the missionaries home because they
didn't want to continue the mission with the LDS church.
The church didn't want them to. So the church was sending them home to their parents or to their beginnings or to whatever they wanted to go to.
End their missions.
And their mission was over. And it was their obligation to get the lady missionaries back to their families. And they asked their families to wait for them at the harbor in New York to receive them off of that ship. And those who couldn't, like Eunice's, I don't know if somebody was there to receive Eunice or not, because some of them were Mormons and their families weren't.
Okay.
And anyway, they were required to go back to their family first. The men weren't. So Bill, Bruce,
Dan,
I'm not sure if, I think Stephen went back to Salt Lake because he had real strong pulls up there.
Ties in the
hierarchy of the church. Jalando him,
Yeah.
And I think maybe they talked him into going back there first. I'm not sure. I can't remember that part. But the others came to Mexico, and Stephen could have been with them, I'm not sure, and met Joel.
Amazing. And of course, they meet Joel.
And were so convinced that he knew what he was talking about.
And so they both sold themselves into Joel's mission.
Yes.
Where were you when this happened?
I was living at that point. I was living in Burl, Utah, going to school in Enterprise, Utah.
Okay.
And this George L. Dockstetter became the president of the mission in southern Utah.
Okay.
In St. George there.
But president of the mission for Joel?
For Joel.
Okay, got it.
Yes, for the Church of the Firstborn. He was the head of that mission. So my dad and the ones that were interested in Joel's church up in that area, there in Laney, and the Barlows, I think, came from some part of Utah, even the Shrewsburys, that's where they came into the picture. Went to meetings there in St. George with this George L. Dockstetter, and to learn more about it.
At this point, had Grandpa met Joel?
He had met him, but he didn't follow him.
Wasn't convinced yet.
He didn't. Verlin came and brought them a priesthood expounded, the same tool.
Wow.
And left it with them to read. They had come up to see a father, being a trucker, would take a load of harnesses and horse equipment to Mexico.
But of course, okay, yes, for the LeBaron brothers.
For the LeBarons. Yeah. And that's when the father really got to know Joel.
Yes, on a ride
and
back.
He was just being real careful and not talking to him because they knew him as some crazy people, the LeBarons. His Ben had been out to Short Creek and out to, Colorado City where they were, and they just didn't pay him 2 cents.
Yeah.
But he learned on that trip that Joel was a very respectful and decent human being, and by the time somehow they came back, or the next trip, I'm not sure, he started asking the questions to Joel. And about that time was when Verlin came to the farm out there where we lived in Burl, Utah, and to Short Creek where Aunt Genevieve was after the raid, because now we're all kind of like back in our territories, and left the priesthood expounded. And Aunt Genevieve threw hers in the wood box right away. She said she didn't want that kind of filthy literature in her house. And Mother just set hers on her nightstand, and while Father goes on this trip with Joel to bring their stuff down for him. And Father gets converted. Oh, Aunt Genevieve, maybe I'm confusing it. It was 2 trips that Father made with Joel, but Aunt Genevieve ended up pulling hers back out of the wood box because all kinds of questions were coming up that she couldn't answer in what they were talking about, maybe with George Dockstetter and these people that got together somehow. And she pulled it back out of the wood box and read it and got converted. A Mother read hers also that was on the nightstand and was converted before Father got back from his trip.
She's convinced.
Yes. And Father came back. Father got converted on the trip and didn't know how he was ever going to go home and tell his wives that he believed in what Joel was teaching. When he got here, to his amazement, they had already been converted and were accepted it with open arms. So from then on, Father started taking his older children with him to Mexico. We went to a conference, the first conference ever held down here.
Okay.
That's when Gayla met Joel and got her testimony of marrying him. And we went back, and the second time we came to another conference, it was when David Shore went down and back with us. And by then, because George Dockstetter was the head of the mission up there, they held a conference in Hurricane, Utah. And that was our territory, our area. Yeah. And we invited all those French missionaries that showed up, including Marilyn and whoever was there, Janae and Bruce and all of them, out to a dance in Short Creek that was the highlight of our lives at that time. So they were a ballroom type dancing that we did once a month out there and lived for those monthly dances. We invited all those missionaries at the conference to come out and go to our dance. And,
wow.
And that's when the Shrewsburys came into the picture, and we met them and their parents. And it was all tied to George L. Dockstetter, the head of the Utah mission. And after that was when Father started taking steps to move us each year or so a little bit closer to Mexico. And we moved from Burl to Jerome, Arizona, where about 6 other families moved also that were interested in Joel's work. And from there we moved to Douglas and then to the colony.
Está sintonizado a El Chalán Radio Spot. Our first coffee chat is with Rhonita Stubbs Jensen, coming to share her side of what she'd like to share about the French missionaries. Okay, and here's commentary on the artwork for the coffee chats. Tell us about this cover.
Okay.
So, who is this first one here?
Okay, the first one was Dan Jordan.
Okay.
And he came in the beginning, came home on the ship with them, and came directly to meet Joel LeBaron and see if he was the man they had found out in their studies and in their literatures through Priesthood Expounded that held that highest office. They wanted to meet that man. Of all the Spencer girls, I felt like she was the most down to earth, and you know, sorry to say, but her sister was married to my husband later on, and she was, to me, Sharon was more serious and more connected to reality than any of the others.
Okay.
And she's definitely stood by Dan through everything.
Everything. Wow. And what happened to her after and what happened to her later?
Well, after Dan followed Herbal, of course, in all the killings and everything, and she was there. And I wouldn't even venture to say her part in it all, what she knew or didn't know or anything like that. I've heard many stories. But she did come back down here, eventually by herself. And I saw her, visited with her, went to Rosa's, a seminar, a few things that went on over there.
Interesting.
When she was present. And of course, we were never friends after that, because she was like on the enemy side.
I understand the animosity that must have been there after everything.
Because of what happened with Joel and Herbal, and they were following Herbal, and
Absolutely.
I was following Joel.
Well, let me ask you: are those all his wives for Dan Jordan
Oh no!
that you know of?
No, there was one. I think her name was Nancy, and she came to visit our family, the Jensen family, Matthew Jensen family in Denver, because she's related to Matthew's wife, Bonnie. Her sister was related to Bonnie's mother somehow. Well, Nancy lived in the same town up near Denver, just outside of Denver, where they lived after Herbal was put into prison, and Dan continued with all that he continued with, and she was Sharon's sister wife, but didn't have a clue, I don't think, as to everything that was going on like Sharon did.
Okay.
Sharon was in the know.
Very interesting information, absolutely.
Anyway,
and then the next person in the picture.
I know Dan had other wives that Herbal gave him after that, but I don't know that history.
Good. That's what I wanted to know. And then tell us about Steve. What you know about Steven Silver?
He was the most fun-loving guy. He was always full of energy, singing little songs. He was the kind that you want around your fireside chat. Singing all the old songs that ever came up, the funny ones, the cute ones.
Wow.
And he was also very intelligent. Came from the Mormon church, from, I think, one of the upper lines of men that just tried so hard to get him back and save him. But in our community, he was just, I could say he was more like the principal of a school, and a fun-loving school. He even went to and visited the kibbutz, or whatever they're called, in Israel to understand their type of education and learning and so on, and came back. And when the school project in the early years of living here, after I was married to Bill Tucker, I believe, I'm not sure who set up the school, but I think Herbal was directly involved with it. And all the brethren kind of except Joel wasn't around as far as I remember. set up a town school. And they were going to have something maybe modeled a little bit after these Israeli schools that Stephen had checked out and visited, and where everybody ate in the same kitchen, and everybody's clothes were washed by a group. I mean, it was a united kind of like school community project.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they were most definitely looking for the excellency of everything.
Oh, yes. They wanted more than anything to have a setup where their children could be raised and taught and have a standard that was above par.
And then of course, their vision was not short-sighted. They were here for the long run.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. And they were looking for answers as to how to raise their children here, like the scriptures say, as calves in the stall,
yep.
So that they'll be here forever and with the most, precious parts and knowledge and understanding and teaching.
Amazing.
Their whole heart was on raising a higher standard with their children and families, and they didn't want them to have to go back out into the world and
not be educated and not have access to the best of what
the very best. Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us about who he married and how he's...
He married Beverly Silver. Gosh, what was her name? She's from Australia. She even had the cute Australia accent.
Wow.
And they lived Sharon lived on one side of the street down the road from us, a block or within a block, and he and Beverly lived on the other side of the street. So they were close neighbors. But Beverly became extra close to Marilyn, Janae, and Eunice and I. We became like a little clique, you might say. And Janae Wakeham, Eunice, or Nancy, Bill's wife, and Marilyn, Bill's first wife, and Beverly kind of was in for quite a while. The four of us were just like glue.
Okay.
But Beverly was the fifth one that kind of was with us for a few years also.
Wow, okay.
And the four of us would all deliver each other's babies, and there was no doctors around. There was no way to get to a doctor even. So we took care of all our needs right here within the community as best we could. And maybe there'd be one vehicle that in emergency somebody could go out in. Anyway, Beverly, gosh.
Was Beverly his only wife?
At the time. And I think they had 5 children, I'm not sure, but not by then. They had 3 or 4 and along with us. And later they moved to Baja, so I didn't know them later on in their lives. She and Stephen ended up moving to Baja when they made that colony.
The Molinos? Los Molinos? Mm-hmm. Okay. And any other wives?
Or to San Diego. It could have been just San Diego they lived.
Okay. And Beverly's the only wife that you know of, or I guess he married others later?
Well, of course he did.
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Well, she was his first. Not even sure if Doris was the second.
Okay.
Or the third. Who else? Carolyn White. No. Yeah.
Okay.
I believe he ended up marrying Carolyn, White, and she was the one that stayed with him after all was said and done.
Okay.
And followed him away from the group.
Okay.
Marilyn White, and she was at the time a neighbor. At the time they lived here in the colony, she was a neighbor also to him and to us, though I didn't ever get to know her very well.
Okay.
Anyway, so So I don't know his other wives, but he had several.
Okay. Fascinating. And of course, if you're just joining us, we're here. We've decided in presenting an exclusive of stories that would interest the LeBaron community, we've decided to present and capture some of the memories and the history of what happened with the so-called the French missionaries. And present an exclusive where we could sit down maybe with 3-4 people involved, the persons involved with that could help the new generation hear about these stories, these very important contributions to the community of LeBaron, and of course the work of Joel F LeBaron here in the colony, and their stories and what happened with them, who were they married, and what's gone on. So, can you tell us, Aunt Rhonita, about the third person in our picture, Nancy
Folk.
What's her first name? Eunice. Eunice Nancy Folk. Of course, there's a lot of curiosity on her, because not only did she marry Bill Tucker, but at some point he was even married to Joel F LeBaron, or at least we know that that she was Joel F LeBaron's 7th marriage.
Wow. This is like opening Pandora's box.
yes, I can only imagine.
She was, in this picture, she's on the boat coming back from France, and she was one of the French missionaries who were excommunicated altogether. And she was in love with Bill Tucker. And so was Marilyn Lamborn, who is standing on the other side of Bill, in love with Bill Tucker. They became fascinated with him in the mission field.
Wow. And this is before you met Bill Tucker?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. And while there in the mission field, Bill Tucker was the first counselor to the president. Dang.
I have that information right here.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay, William Tucker was the second counselor, in the mission presidency. While he was there, they converted more members into the Mormon Church than they had in many years before. They were amazed at all the converts that were just flooding in.
So very, very great progress.
Oh yeah, he was known for bringing in the most members, and they all loved it at first, of course. But
fascinating.
So Bill would spend one night out on the deck with Marilyn, and the next night out on the deck with Eunice, as they came home on the ship to America to come down to Colonia LeBaron to meet Joel LeBaron.
So, in this picture where they're on the boat, do you know of this picture? And my question, of course, immediately, just hearing the story, is this them coming back to from the mission to meet Joel?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, the honest truth is that the Mormon missionaries the lady missionaries weren't allowed to just be received by anybody and go back home or wherever they wanted. They had to be received by their family or someone and returned to their home. The men were a little freer and could kind of do more of what they wanted. So Eunice had to go back to her North Carolina or South Carolina, I'm not sure which.
And the LDS Church obligated this?
Oh yeah, it was their rules for the returned missionaries.
But I mean, obviously they weren't excommunicated as soon as they arrived. They were excommunicated, what, a year later?
Oh, I think their missions were 2 years long, and it was at the end of their mission.
And by the end of the mission, they were already excommunicated?
Before the end.
Before they finished the mission?
Yes.
Wow, so they were on their way excommunicated. But I mean, if they were excommunicated, why were they forcing Eunice to go back to her parents?
Oh, because they were responsible for those women when they sent them on their mission. And they had to return them safely to their parents.
So they went and sought her out?
No, they sent Marilyn as well, Janae, Marlene, all of them, had to go back to their parents, and they delivered them safely into their parents' arms.
Because the church was making themselves responsible for the women.
Yes.
But how did they do this? Did they find them? Did they send them letters? Did they come and look for them themselves?
Those were just the rules that they knew before they left.
But I mean, if they were already excommunicated, why would they follow them?
Because the Mormon church felt that responsibility. That's my understanding.
Okay.
Somebody else from the Mormon church could tell you the real story, maybe Linda or someone.
More of why they were still involved.
Why they were so obedient to those rules. They had to.
Yeah.
They were like hired by them, and they had to be returned to their like when women are returned to their father's home
absolutely.
After a divorce.
So let me ask you more. We're just on the third person of the pictures, and let me ask you, of course, what do you know of the history of Eunice? Of what happened with her later with Bill, and how Eunice ended up involved with Joel F LeBaron?
Oh my. Okay. Well, Eunice. She actually had studied, she had the most beautiful voice you would ever hear. I loved her voice. I would beg her to sing. She actually studied, she was an opera, an opera. She had an opera singer voice.
Wow.
And she knew every musical, all the roles and the songs and everything, and she sang so beautifully. It was like hearing angels and she had this voice and this range that even singing the hymns, she would just take them to the heavens.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes, and I loved voice. And then of course later I was married to Bill, and she was my sister wife, so I would beg her to sing, and just enjoyed every little bit of it. But so she came and was returned to her parents, and Bill continued, and Marilyn was returned to her parents, or someone came to meet them off the ship, or else they were returned to them. Their parents usually met them on the ship as they were unloaded off the ship. Yeah. That was kind of like how they
custom.
did it. Yeah. So the men came here. Bill, Dan Jordan, Stephen maybe?
And Bruce?
Oh no, Bruce. No, I'm not sure about Stephen if he came at that time.
Okay.
I forget the story. I'm 80 years old.
It's all good. but your memory is giving us amazing insights.
At least it'll give you something to go search out.
Yeah.
To those who know better. Mm-hmm. Have all the facts and figures still. I've lived like 3 lives in one, and I kind of don't remember that far back so good. So the men came here by themselves because they could. They were wanting to meet Joel LeBaron no matter what. And it took the women a week or 2 weeks to go to their homes and then get down here if they could, and they did. So Eunice, we're still talking about Eunice, showed up here. I don't know how long later. Marilyn showed up 2 weeks later. Okay. She convinced her parents that this was what she wanted, and she wanted to continue this
2
trek.
weeks back,
and she was
join the men.
In love with Bill Tucker, and she came down and she married him, was baptized. By then, Bill had already checked Joel out, and the whole 9 yards. And so Marilyn showed up, and married Bill Tucker, and I believe Dan Jordan, of all people, was here at the time. And I think Bill and Marilyn wanted to go back to the Hutterites because they were investigating all unusual religions and peoples on their honeymoon. And I think Dan had to jump in and go with them, even on their honeymoon. Something like that is the story I hear.
So they were all close-knit together, involved in everything.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And then Eunice came later. And Eunice, by the time she got here, then she married Bill Tucker as the second wife. Maybe 3 months later.
Okay.
Trying to keep it straight. I believe like 3 months later.
From your recollection.
Yeah. And
how did she end up with Joel LeBaron?
Okay, we're going to have a detour off of the French Missionaries to go through that little bit of history.
Okay.
But she was also, being this very great person and this great, magnificent voice and spiritual person, she also had this very jealous streak.
Okay.
And she couldn't really hold herself together in polygamy, even though she was so sweet. I was the next wife in. Okay, now we're not talking about the French missionaries. But
no, I mean we're
her.
Yeah, we're capturing her because
with her, to me, when the saying, when she was good, she was very, very good, and when she was bad, she was horrid.
Yeah. I know other people just like that.
Okay, she had two very strong sides to her, and on her good side, when it was my time to come into the family, she made a dinner. She was with Bill here alone in the colony. Marilyn was up in Utah with her parents with yellow jaundice. Mm-hmm. She was with her firstborn up with her parents. So Eunice was the one that was here, and together they made a dinner and invited me to eat and invited me into the family.
Okay.
And at the time, I was in love with someone else emotionally, even though I felt like Bill Tucker was the man of my dreams that lived the laws of the gospel and lived everything that I had looked for in my whole life in a man. Mm-hmm. But I kind of got hooked emotionally to someone else before he came along.
Okay.
So I was already emotionally in love with someone else, but Eunice, being the good wife that she was, and in spite of and believing so strong in polygamy, made dinner and invited me into the family with Bill. And I, at the time, told him, I really appreciate how beautifully you invited me into the family and all this, but no, thank you. I have someone else in mind.
Yeah.
And I rejected.
Wow.
And Bill walked me home, and after that, he went on a mission, and that was another whole story. But she was just peaches and cream as far as trying to live the law of Sarah and polygamy to the utmost of her ability. And she said at the time of my wedding, even though it was very hard on her later, that she would have made me a cherry pie if there were any cherries in town, knowing that was my favorite pie.
Wow, so she was definitely...
the spirit was willing, but the flesh was weak.
Absolutely, and usually it's the case. That
was her, to me, and I just loved her for all of her desires, good desires, and her trying to do
great efforts.
What she believed in, her great, amazing efforts.
Wow.
So I loved her to this day. We're good friends, you know. But, I just adore her.
And of course, I want to take a moment to share that from all of the French missionaries that we know of, all of them have passed except Eunice. I hear that Eunice is around in her 90s and still the only living French missionary.
That's the
Of
truth.
the LeBaron community.
Yes. Well, as far as I know, yeah.
Yeah, this is what Lydia told me.
Okay. She knows. She knows. Okay.
And she ended up with Joel in what way?
Okay. So she went from Bill finally couldn't handle her two personalities.
How long was she married to Bill?
A year and a half, maybe.
Okay.
I was married to him at the time, and I had no clue that I was part of the thorn in her side, because I came into the family loving someone else and didn't honor and cherish William Tucker like she did. She just loved everything and every smell and good and bad and you name it about him. She was almost like a fanatically in love with Bill Tucker.
And it would add to her
grief of me just taking it so lightly and
and not only that, but it would add to her pain of sharing him.
Yes, absolutely. Even though she wanted to and she believed in it and she wanted to be this elite lady and woman.
You're telling the story of so many women here.
I know. Well, she was the extreme example of the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak to me.
Okay.
The most extreme in my life. And I could understand that. I saw where she was coming from, but I had no clue at the time. She would get so upset. She would go out, walk out the door, slam the door, get full of the spirit of the adversary, and slam the door, grab her scriptures, and the 2 German Shepherd dogs that we were attending would follow her in a big coat to keep warm because it was winter at the time. And she'd go walking away to see if she can recapture the Spirit of God.
Wow.
Get over her
rage.
Yes, her jealousy, her upsetness. And she couldn't contain it. She couldn't help herself. And Bill would try and try and try with her. And finally, Bill said, well, the scriptures, I don't know if he told Joel this or who, but he said, the scriptures say to forgive 90 times 9 or something like that. I feel like I've forgiven 900 times 90, and it still isn't working.
Yeah.
And he ended up asking her to leave the family.
Okay.
He literally almost booted her out. But
at that, I'm sure there's much more to it, and I'm sure at this time it was such a burden. She became eventually a huge burden, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. We couldn't pass 2 days without it coming back.
Ouch.
And it was just such an interruption to our lives, and we could hardly continue on. Anyway, so she left, went to Joel, of course, because she was very close to Joel and everything. She didn't want to leave the people. And Joel ended up connecting her with, oh my gosh.
Look at that.
Ended up connecting her with Mauro Gutierrez in the mountains. And he already had 2 wives. He already had Esther and Joanne.
Okay.
But he was the funnest, loving Mexican American. He spoke English and Spanish, and he was just an amazing person. Everybody loved Mauro.
This story is so fascinating.
Yeah, this is.
And then look at this. We already have an hour of chat, and we're not even past. We haven't even got.
We haven't got to Bill. Yeah, I know. I'm telling you.
So maybe we can make. Keep telling me, because I have to hear the story of how she connected with Joel.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, I'm producing the LeBaron legacy, and there's little known of her.
Yeah. Okay. So she ended up 2 months later, I think, marrying Mauro Gutierrez.
Wow.
As a 3rd wife. And they lived up in the mountains. And I even remember, because as much as I loved her and as much as I enjoyed everything about her and had no clue that I was like probably the worst thorn in her side,
Yeah.
I would go with her and try to comfort her and try to help her get a good spirit back, and not knowing that. And she was so sweet. She accepted me, being there, trying to comfort her and help her get the Spirit of God back in her life.
Yeah.
Oh, it was crazy. It was crazy.
Stuff, absolutely.
Anyway, she married Mauro and up till now she had not been able to have children. And she believes so strong in healing yourself with faith, like Bill had said he had done. He claimed he had a shattered leg at one time, and they went to the doctors, and when he went to, I'm just telling you this story because it's what she wanted to do also with her life. Bill went to the doctors and was going to be operated on the next morning to get all these pieces of bone put back together in a shattered leg. And he exercised his faith so strong that by the next morning when they took an x-ray of his leg, it was all put back together again. Don't ask me how. I don't even understand that kind of faith.
Miraculously, huh?
Yes.
Wow.
A miracle. He claims he didn't need the operation anymore. This is his story. And so Eunice knew that, and she wanted to have that kind of faith in having children and why she couldn't have children. And she didn't want to go to a doctor to see what the reasons were. She just wanted to heal herself with that faith.
Okay.
That's what a great person she was.
Wow.
So determined to be such a righteous and elite person. Anyway, it just didn't work, and she didn't have any children with Bill. When she went to and married Mauro, she finally got convinced, I don't know how, to go see a doctor, and found out that she had cysts on her ovaries and needed to have them burned off. Mm-hmm. She got them burned off, and she ended up having 2 girls.
Wow, okay, precious.
Had beautiful 2 children that she just was her lifeline, and with Mauro. And then, of all the sad stories, tragically, he was killed, and she was left widowed again. And Osmond brought her back to the colony with the 2 children. She lived down in Bruce and Janae's home. That they weren't here at the time using. She set up housekeeping there, which was 2 blocks from our place.
Okay.
So we continued on with this amazing relationship through her next marriage and her children, and she was the most spotless person. She's clean. She never had anything excess. She was. I remember her little shelves for her daughter's clothes. They would just be these little sets of clothes and immaculate, and never anything more. She'd give it to a needy person or somebody else rather than have extra.
Wow.
Anyway, that's the kind of person Eunice was. So she married him. He was left widowed. And the next person that came along in her life, oh no, of course she always went back to Joel, because Joel was like
the leader.
No, he was there for her always, and had this love that she felt.
So he was kind of like her counselor?
Like a brother or a counselor, okay. Yes. And she ended up marrying Joel, but at the same time there was another family and his wife that were converted to the work, and I don't even remember who he is right now. My memory's faded. But they went on a trip back to his home which was in the eastern part of the southeastern part of the United States. And she went with him on this trip and fell for him. And when she came back, that's who she fell for him. And when she came back, she had already just been married to Joel a couple of months. And when she came back, Joel had to go and release her and say, let her go because
she had gone with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, so that's how that happened.
Yes.
By the lady.
At my wedding, Marilyn wasn't there yet because she was still up with yellow jaundice, and hadn't got home. In those days, we didn't get around so easy. And but she was in agreement with the marriage. And Eunice was the one that went with us, and the whole town went over to the Springs in the back of a truck, because that was our bus.
Yeah.
And Eunice was struggling so hard. She was having such a hard time that Bill took us out behind the mesquite bushes, and we prayed. We knelt down and prayed. Eunice, Bill, and I prayed for the Spirit of God to be with us. And she wanted to so much. She wanted it to happen. She was in agreement, but just going through hell. And she actually sobbed out loud through the whole ceremony. She said, of course, let's go ahead with it.
When he married who?
Me.
She sobbed at your...
Through the whole ceremony.
Ouch, at Rhonita.
Yeah, out loud. Just sad.
Wow.
Sobbed. But she begged us not to cancel it.
And she also begged to be there?
Yes.
That's so crazy.
I know. It's beyond my ability to even understand. Mm-hmm.
I never had...
That's when she said, she went home with Janae, because she was her dear friend.
Yeah.
We were the close girls. We did a lot of things together. Marilyn, Eunice, Janae, and I.
Yeah.
And we were the four, pillars, and we had babies together. We exercised together. We bettered our lives. We educated each other, and however we could together. We were the little group. And she was definitely a beloved part of that little group. Anyway, she goes home with Janae that night, and she lets me know that's when she said, I would have made you a cherry pie.
Oh, okay, well.
But there were no cherries in town. She wanted so much to perform and be that woman that was giving the next wife her place.
But most likely she was obsessed.
Yes. Mm-hmm. The spirit was willing, but the flesh was weak.
So how about that? Just to take a quick intermediate. So by the time we recorded this, it's been a few months, and since then, in the broadcast, we mentioned that Nancy was the only living missionary. But Aunt Rhonita has informed me that Nancy has passed during this holiday season, and at this point, all of the missionaries have passed. So just want to update that information. What follows next is we ended up pausing the recording as I hung out with Aunt Rhonita at her precious house, and she filled me in on all the details of who was this man that she had fell in love with and had to reject Bill's invitation to join their family. Initially, she told me about how all of this came together, and for about an hour or so, hour and a half, she told me her fascinating, amazing story with Bill and how things developed, the challenges they faced, all this amazing stuff. But that's not what we came to capture for the French missionaries. So we didn't record that. we wanted it to be just a personal, a one-on-one for me and Aunt Rhonita. I am endlessly privileged and grateful that Aunt Rhonita would share this with me, because it gave me amazing appreciation for the story and background of everything that was happening. Still, the next portion we present is the Bill Tucker, the William Preston Tucker's portion. And still, even after we cover that, still speak of his portion for some 26 minutes. Amazing, amazing stuff. Here is that. Okay, so tell us about Bill. Here's the best part that I've been waiting to hear. And of course, I want to know, we've already had an introduction and semi-introduction of how Bill came into your life. But can you fill us in a little bit more about Bill?
Now, this is going to bring in another whole airy story of mine.
But look at this. I don't blame you for being... eventually, you fell head over heels for Bill.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is what I know.
Yes, but it was a tug of war.
Oh,
as well.
I bet.
For my family. Oh, wow. This is just an outline. I never gave this talk, but I was preparing to. Why and how I married Bill. Nothing's on, right? Don't turn anything on yet.
So in this break, Aunt Rhonita has shared with me many amazing, beautiful details of the things that transpired for her in how things came together for her and Bill. She shared among these things of how Eunice and Bill made a dinner and invited Aunt Rhonita to join their family. And Aunt Rhonita at that point was emotionally unavailable with a pending romance with someone else who was for sure most likely interested in marrying her. So she had to decline initially, and but in her prayer and in her search for answers, she received a solid confirmation that Bill should be the man she should be with, and eventually, through all of the deep things that happened around her and all the incredible situation involving the Stubbs and moving around and the pending courtship with her previous boyfriend, decides to marry Bill. And yet, during this time, Bill was married to Marilyn and Eunice. But for Eunice, it was a much, much more difficult thing, even though Eunice had a heart to believe and to live plural marriage, and this is what she wanted to do, of course. Testimony to live plural marriage, and sought it in many actions she took. She still had to face the hardship of it and the jealousy and everything that came along, which was unbearable not only for her, but for everyone involved in her marriage, including Aunt Rhonita. And so there was at one point, after Rhonita decided to marry Bill, Rhonita leaves on a trip, goes back to Jerome, where her old boyfriend lived, to visit one of her relatives. And unsure of the whole situation, because everything was very heavy with the situation with Eunice, unsure, heads back to visit one of her friends. Joel LeBaron is involved, and at the same time, they didn't know what to think of this whole situation. And again, in her prayer and in her search, was confirmed a second time that she should not depart from William Tucker, from Bill William Tucker. And Bill, at that moment, had decided to come and meet her and give her free agency and release her from her commitments in her marriage. And they chit-chat for a minute. And Bill, I'm sure with the most heart, with the most anguished of hearts, was going to do this. And she tells him, I've received confirmation that I shouldn't leave you. And she tells me that Bill just throws himself back in the bed, relieved in so many senses that it was so hard for him to come and release her from her marriage commitments, that this wasn't really going to happen and she was going to stay. So here, within these details, and of course keep it in short, sweet, and simple, we pick up of where Aunt Rhonita is married to Bill. And eventually, Aunt Rhonita, can you tell us what ended up happening with Eunice once you were married and once you decided to stay?
Okay. Wow. You did a great job. So, once I was confirmed the second time that I absolutely was to be with Bill, I came home with them, with Marilyn and Bill. And Bill got a job in El Paso at the UTEP as a chemistry professor, and Marilyn took a job as a high school teacher, which she was qualified to do. And so Eunice and I watched her son, who was the only child in the family at the time, took turns watching him either in El Paso or the Colony for the remainder of that school year. And it continued pretty stressful until finally, each time Bill was around, we just, didn't know from one day to the next if it was going to be
any drama presented.
Yeah, drama or peace. And it was never like more than 2 days in a row that we had peace.
And I'm sure with what you told me about your story, Bill being so relieved that you weren't going to exit his marriage commitments, and seeing the stress that Eunice presented to the marriage, was perhaps most likely going to make sure that Eunice did not influence a third
episode.
A third episode of perhaps you exiting their marriage.
Yes. So eventually, Bill felt like he had completed all the requirements of the Bible to forgive 90 times 9, and he said he forgave 90 times 900 times 90, and felt totally justified in asking Eunice to leave.
And to release her of
the marriage commitment. And
how did that go? I mean, don't get too much detail because we have so much to cover, but...
It was scary at first to me because I knew she could come back anytime. And I was actually not looking forward to more of that. And I remember when she went to Joel, who was her, her counselor and her mentor, and he ended up connecting her with Mauro Gutierrez in the mountains.
Okay.
And they got married within 2.5 months or so, and I remember being so relieved when that happened.
Okay, I understand.
Because I knew that once she was married to another man, she couldn't come back to Bill.
Yeah.
I knew it was safe then to just be.
To live in the peace that remained.
Yes. And from then on, our relationship flourished.
Very wonderful.
And we got to know each other in every sense. And I realized that in truth, even though it was a rough beginning and, just didn't imagine how it could ever happen, we hung in there, and he became, in my eyes, my real true soulmate. I felt like I found my real true soulmate.
Very, very amazing. Aunt Rhonita, can you tell us about when it comes to William Bill Tucker? Can you tell us about, as far as the roles he played, did he marry other women after you?
Yes.
Okay, and who were his other marriages?
There was only one, and it was Beulah Spencer.
Okay.
Wow. It was Beulah Spencer, and she came to us because Ervil and Floyd got together with Bill and was looking for a better place for Beulah than where she was headed, which was into David Shore's family.
Okay.
She liked David Shore, and that's who she was in love with, and somehow her father, Floyd Spencer, said he's not of the right lineage, the right blood lineage. He has, I don't know, Russian blood or I don't know what he said, but it was, he didn't want her to marry David Shore.
Okay, I understand.
And so between them all, they tried to hook her up with Bill Tucker. And of course, Bill had given these 4 o'clock in the morning classes to the whole youth in the community. He gave such good classes that the kids, the teenagers, were willing to get up and be at his class in Marilyn's living room at 4 in the morning and just ate up every word of his teaching. The scriptures, and he used not only the history, not only the Bible, but the Josephus.
Oh, okay.
To give it life, to bring more life into it, who was the historian of those times. And anyway, Beulah was there. And Beulah was preening and, just kind of like making up to him because that's where the direction her parents had sent her.
And did he have any children with her?
Yes.
Okay.
They had a Zenith who was my Shalom, and Marilyn Seth's age.
Okay.
Zenith, one child.
Okay. What else would you like to share about Bill's involvement? Can you tell us just a little bit, a brief notes about his involvement of what happened with the rest of his life and his involvement with Joel's church as a missionary?
Oh, wow. Well, we didn't get to Marilyn. Oh, no, we're just still on Bill, huh? That's a long one. Okay. He was married to Marilyn and Beulah and I at the time. Me and Beulah had three wives, all three of us. And Marilyn and I didn't like the idea of Beulah being into the family under the circumstances, but I was willing to be there for him and be the wife that accepted her into the family, even though I don't think Marilyn even went to the wedding. It was just too much. And so he continued through all those years as a missionary, anytime Joel needed him for any missionary work. And he was so dedicated and eloquently could explain the scriptures and Joel's position and everything, that and he knew all the scriptures so well. He had this photostatic memory that he knew exactly, no matter what speaker was speaking. Joel himself sometimes would just turn on the stand, and Bill would be sitting there, and he'd ask him, would you get me that scripture to back up what he was saying? And Bill would just open the book instantly to it and give it to him instantly. And he just appreciated, he also, during those years, helped write the ensigns and all the church literature that was, most of the church literature that was written, because he had such a clear view of it all. And he was so gifted in communicating the doctrine in writing as well as speaking. He was always in every conference just the most eloquent speaker, and Bruce was a close second.
Okay.
But Bruce, to me, played more on your emotions and got you all emotionally hyped up.
More evangelical on the emotional side.
And Bill's was just the
doctrine.
the beauty of the facts and the doctrine. portraying it in such a simple and beautiful way.
And let me ask you, of course, I hear from the little I know of the exposure of the history of this, that many, after the assassination of Joel F LeBaron, many of it began to fall apart, even for the French missionaries. Mm-hmm. How did that affect Bill?
Okay, before that time, Bill started a chicken business down here because he needed a way to support his families. He didn't feel good about sending him home $5 for a bottle of oil to live on while he was gone, and he had to figure out a way to help support him. So he started the chicken business, and we had coops made, and 2 or 3 big coops, and we had laying hens and meat hens, and we all helped in it, the family. We all, Beulah, Marilyn, and I all joined with him in doing whatever. We slept in with the little new biddies out in the chicken coops. We did whatever we had to do to make it a success. We helped process them, take them to market. Marilyn and all of us were a big part in the economic venture of that side of things. And while he would still go on missions, when he was home, he was writing ensigns with Erbil and sometimes Steve and different men. All the ensigns that we have with all the different names on them were often written mostly by Erbil and Bill, but they would bring in Verlin or whoever it was. Verlin did write his, did see that everything that he was responsible for was his words. But a lot of them they didn't want it to look like the French missionaries were writing all this history for the Mormon church, all this history of Joel. So they would put different men's names on the ensigns to make it look like it was like more spread out. And Absolutely. It wouldn't be just out of nowhere. It wasn't a deceitful thing. It was because they were interested in those topics. These different men were. So they would bring them in, but they would write the biggest part of it.
Yeah, so that they can contribute.
Yes,
not just be
their little part.
A few people.
Yes. So he spent many, many hours, years, and Stephen helped do all the processing and seeing that they got I helped Stephen many hours and hours publishing, getting them ready for print and all these kinds of things. And he was so good at that. And Marilyn was the English teacher that knew how to do the punctuation and, the spelling and check it all out for that. So it was a teamwork.
Absolutely.
Between the missionaries, those missionaries. And
so then they assassinate Joel.
So then, first Erbil starts separating from Joel.
Okay.
And it was just before Erbil decided that we don't need Joel in there in the office of Christ, that he was second in line, and he wanted to be in that position. And Joel had told him basically
how did Bill respond to that?
Well, he didn't like it at all. I mean, he was on Joel's side all the way. And Joel told Erbil that anybody that comes between me and the people will find themselves on their own. And he warned him ahead of time, but at the same time, he couldn't literally release Erbil from his position without God telling him to. Because he said he didn't put them there, God did, and God had to take them out. Mm-hmm. All along the way. He always stood by that.
So he respected Erbil.
So he respected him in that position, even though he was fighting against him with everything.
With what he's coming with.
Finally, all the brethren and everybody got so on Joel's case that things just weren't going right, and that Erbil was teaching a whole nother doctrine in a whole nother church and getting a following away from him, that you better do something about it. And Bill was one of those who caught on to who Erbil really was portraying himself as, which was a not bipolar, but schizophrenic.
Wow.
He even confided that to Aunt Dorothea. She told us one time that he confided to her that he had found out through all his studying and observing everything and how everything was going that Erbil was actually schizophrenic, and it scared him.
Interesting.
He was being guided by wrong sources, and you name it. And at that point, he even more so wanted to have Joel do something about it. And at the same time, he was reading the doctrine or the stories of Ayn Rand and objectivism and that whole ball game. And between the two of them, he was getting his eyes opened as to what Erbil was trying to do, which was communism, and the wrong way of looking at it. And Ayn Rand was pointing out so beautifully objectivism and the other side of things that he finally confessed to his wives, to us, that, hey, I'm taken up with this objectivism and Ayn Rand, and I just need a break from this for a while, and I'm moving to California. Any of you that want to go with me is welcome to follow. Welcome to be there with me.
Bill Tucker told you this.
Yes. I'll find you a home. We'll still live. I'll still keep you as my wives out there, but each one in your own area. And anybody that wants to come with me, you're welcome.
And he wanted to take a break from Joel's work?
Because he didn't feel like he couldn't keep following it under the present circumstances with Erbil.
Which was deteriorating with his brother.
With Erbil doing and taking over the civil department and deciding what he could do and what he couldn't do. And Joel never gave him the authority to act in the civil department. He did put him as the head of it, in name only, but never gave him the right to act. It was not part of the deal. And Erbil even went so far as he was not only going to be the first grant head, but he was going to direct himself in acting in the civil department and taking people's lives and you name it. So, of course, Bill wanted out at that point.
Yeah, at that point he found his exit out to California.
Yes. And before he left, he and I don't remember who, a couple of the brethren went to Baja, where Joel was, and begged Joel to please do something about Erbil, that things were just way out of hand. And that's when Joel told them that I understand, I know that, but I have to wait on the Lord. He still hasn't given me the okay to release Erbil. So I just have to go with that until he gives me that okay. God gives me that okay. And Bill couldn't handle that. He couldn't go along with that anymore. And he decided to ostracize himself from the group. And that's when he left and went out to California took a job as I can't remember the company, some big company, as a chemist in the company, and was going to make a whole different life until, everything he had done in his life up till this point had led him to here, to Joel and to all of this. And now he had to make this decision to not keep following under what Erbil was doing.
And then let me ask you a question. Once he departed and took a break from everything that was going on with the Church of the Firstborn, and things eventually transpire where they assassinate Joel and everything takes place and things decay. Did he ever come back?
No.
Never.
He died. That was when he died.
How much longer did he live?
He didn't live that much longer.
Really? Just a year or 2 years?
Less. Few months.
Really? So he passed away about a year after they assassinated Joel?
No. before they assassinated Joel.
Oh, he passed before that. Wow.
He passed away. He got peritonitis, which was, he was staying with the Shirley and Ken Matthews. Marilyn was there. They were looking for homes for us to begin our new venture in life.
So this is the part where they say that he left Joel's faith.
Yes.
So he didn't just take a break. He said, I'm out, even in my support of the doctrines and everything.
As long as you continue to have herbal in there and him being able to do what he thinks he can do.
Okay.
So
he ended up passing away, and
so he got sick and passed away, and Verlin came up from Baja to attend to the funeral. And when Verlin went back to Baja to tell Joel how it went, Joel said, "It never ceases to amaze me, the workings of God." I can't remember what exactly now how it was put, but when you go too far, Bill was such a precious part of his work and
Absolutely.
had qualified himself so beautifully that he didn't want to have his life be in vain and all his works in vain, and that God took his life so that he could be still held,
reviewed. So he can still
reviewed.
Reviewed.
Exactly.
Wow, fascinating, incredible.
That's my version of it.
Yes, and I think you have all the right, and this is what I believe.
Estás sintonizado a El Chalán Radio Spot.
So, any few details on Bill's first wife?
Marilyn, oh yes. She and I became the very best of friends. She became closer to me than even my very own sisters, and I was very close to my sisters.
And was she still? And what happened after Bill's death in your relationship with Marilyn?
Oh, Earl moved all of Bill's families because we were packing, getting ready to go out to live with Bill out there. So good old Earl, his brother-in-law, steps in and loads up all our things. We went on a plane, Beulah and I, on a plane out to the funeral and came back. And we got all of our belongings together, and we're still going to move out there because that was what Bill had led us to at that point. And Earl, good old Earl, picked up where Bill left off and moved us to California in his truck and all our belongings, and helped us find homes, Beulah, Marilyn, and I.
Wow.
And saw that we were comfortably situated in a place. And by the way, Eunice lived with me, moved in with me
During that time?
at that point,
Wow.
and helped watch my children while I went to work, and I watched hers while she went to work.
And of course, after Bill has passed away, the drama wasn't
Yes, there was, and we were
Ouch.
just best friends still again.
there. Wow.
So it continued, and it has to this day. She's just
And-
dear to me.
And your relationships with all of Bill's wives remained in positive notes.
No, Marilyn, yes, because Marilyn was just such a sweetheart. She was like a second mother, you might say. And she held the family together no matter what, everywhere. And she was just had such a capacity to give and love and help. And we were very best friends.
And then his fourth wife.
His Beulah and Bill, just before he died, were already on the outs.
Okay.
And it was not going good for him. And she kind of like just hung in there, even though it wasn't going so great. And Earl did move her out, but from then on, she did her own thing out there. We separated and never had anything to do with her from then on. And
from then she found her exit at that point.
yes,
Okay.
and she didn't want anything to do with her previous life or the colony, or didn't want any memories of it or anything to do with it.
Interesting.
So we graciously exited, let her exit.
Absolutely, I totally understand that. And she already had entered in a contentious manner already in some sense.
Yes, it wasn't so pleasant. Marilyn and I, we kept very in touch. I went out many times, married to Earl now.
And who married Earl?
I did.
Oh, okay.
And it was...
But not Marilyn?
No.
Okay.
No. Marilyn's sister was married to Earl. Carol
Okay.
was his first wife.
Okay, got it.
So we kept very much in touch and just were very loving and caring, and our families were just like still one family. But I stayed here and she lived out there. And I came back. I came back. I was the first one to return.
To the colony.
To the colony. And then I married Earl, and we're still just so related and still a part. We lived across the street from them even, and they were just so much a part of our family and life, Carol and Earl.
Yes.
And that it just kind of like continued on with Marilyn, and she was a big part of my children's growing up and family, and all of her children and my children were just
and of course her sister
like
being
full
married.
brothers and sisters.
Yeah, and her sister and you, her
Yes.
ex-sister wife, both married Earl now.
Yes.
So fascinating how it all ends up.
I know. It's crazy. But Beulah was out of the picture, and we tried to bring her in every once in a while. We tried to invite her and make her a part, but she wasn't that interested. And finally we managed to get at least a scene with Marilyn did, because she was famous for trying to keep the brothers and sisters in the know and with each other. And so Aseneth, who was Shalom's and Seth's age, would come and visit the family and be a part of things a lot more.
Okay, wow.
Until she later married a friend of an excommunicated member, Terry Iyer. She married him and had 3 children and moved back east somewhere.
Okay.
And got lost.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit of whatever you knew about Neil Polson?
I didn't know anything about Neil Polson.
He just came in shortly and stayed shortly and didn't remain.
I don't think he even came in. He was one that came home on the ship with the French Missionaries and returned to his church rather than became
Joel.
a part of
Okay.
the LeBaron.
Okay, and then what can you tell us of
Marlene.
Marlene?
She did the same. She liked Bruce a lot, and Janae and Bruce would have loved to have had her in the family. But she chose also to go back to her church and her
And
people.
she never came to the colony to meet Joel?
I'm not sure. I don't really know, but she never became a part of it.
Okay, so she never eventually came down. Okay. And then, of course, that leaves us with Bruce Wakeham and Janae Abbott.
Okay.
And then, of course, that leaves us with Bruce Wakeham and Janae Allen.
Okay. Bruce Wakeham was a very educated and he was an only child. His parents, Jerry Bruce Wakeham, district president, and knew the scriptures just like Bill did, and would give just the best talks ever in conference. Everybody looked.
And he was very inspired.
Yes.
Compared to all the other missionaries.
Very. He and Bill were, I say, the two outstanding spiritual men of the whole group.
All the Wakeham's. Listen to this.
Yeah. And they were best friends. Bill and Bruce were just like buddies.
Great
friends.
And let me ask you, when he got here, he was already married to Juna?
No, of course
not. Okay, so
not.
this happened after.
Oh yeah.
And of course, we all want to know who he ended up marrying.
Well, he married Janae, not Juna, Janae.
Oh yes.
He married Janae at the Springs.
Okay.
Gosh, I want to say when Bill married Marilyn, but I'm not sure.
But that soon after.
Yes, soon after. She was so convinced also, and let her parents know that this was where she wanted to be, and they allowed her agency. And she married Bruce Wakeham, and they were just like best friends and powerful couple, yes. Along with Bill and Marilyn. And she was, of course, one of our famous four. Yes. Growing up, and all our children, we had children at the same time, and learned so much from Janae. She was such a mother hen also, and such a very educated, sweet person. But I'm talking about Bruce, right?
And then who else did Bruce marry?
Later on, he married Jackie. I don't remember her last name. Who had been married before and had a son that was my Bill's age.
Okay.
And he married Jackie as a second wife. And then he married one of the Bustillos twins, Angie.
Oh, okay. So he was married to Angie.
Angie. Mm-hmm. He was married to Angie as the third wife.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And those were the three that, were around the most while we were living here with all of ours. And then, all those years.
And then what about Aunt Gayla?
Oh, wait. Dang. Laurie was in there somewhere. Laurie was his second wife.
Okay, well, this is the fascinating...
I'm messing up here. But she was only there for 6 months. No, 6 months or more. No, a year and a half.
He was married with Laurie but didn't have children.
Yes, he did. He
did?
Yes, he had Letitia.
Oh, okay.
So Laurie was Bruce's second wife.
Okay.
Is that who she married? When we moved down, that's who she married. She married Bruce Wakeham, and Lorraine married Osmond Jones.
Oh, okay.
Before I married Bill Tucker.
Interesting.
That's who she was married to.
Okay.
And he moved her up to the mountains later on. And I was married to Bill, and I went to visit her up there. And he more or less moved her up to the mountains and went back to the States with Janae and kind of abandoned her a little bit up there. And these beautiful people in the mountains took her in and became part of her new family, mm-hmm. who were there for her. And I actually went up to visit her one time, the only time I've ever ridden on this old train that goes up to the mountains. That was the only way to get there. Uh-huh. They had board seats and you name it, the old train. I went with my children that I had, kids I had, and visited her, and my heart was just broken to see the conditions and how she was living, but she was so happy with her newfound people up there. I can't even remember who they are now, but eventually Bruce and she separated, and she never stayed with him, and she married Earl as a third wife after Maudie. Earl took her in.
Okay, so Maudie, but Earl was married already to somebody, and then you came into the picture.
There was, no, I'm 6. I'm way at the tail end.
Okay, you're right. This happens later.
Yes, way later. So it was Laurie for a short period with Bruce, then Jackie, and then Angie.
And then Gail.
Oh, well, yeah, okay. Way later, after Joel
had
passed, he married Gayla, and she lived with him. They lived in Phoenix by now. Had left the church, you might say. I don't know how Gayla ended up with him, but he must have had enough belief still in Joel that she still became part of his family for 2 or 3 years, and finally she left because he was just estranging himself from
all of Joel's work.
All of Joel's work, yeah.
And then just
estranging.
A last portion that I would like to talk about lightly is some of the other missionaries that are not in the picture for the cover of the exclusive. Who are some of the ones that are missing? Of course, we have Tom Lydier that are missing, and of course, we already talked lightly about David Shore. Is there anybody else besides that?
David Shore was first and gone by the time all this happened with the
yes.
But he was the reason
that they connected
with Joel.
Yes.
He was their connection.
And then Thomas Lydier comes into the picture.
He comes later. He was still over there
when all this was happening.
And probably a different district and who knows
Interesting.
He wasn't part of that little group. As far as I remember, Linda could tell you better.
But of course, still a French missionary.
But no, knew all about it, yeah.
And
he tells his story of the French mission. He tells it from his in the book.
In his book, of course.
Yeah,
and,
in the church history.
I plan to sit down with others to see what we can capture on the story. It's fascinating, everything. And of course, I'm left with the impact that they had in our community. With all the generations that don't know that they came from the French, so-called French missionaries.
The French mission.
The French mission. Perhaps.
But they were from the States. From Utah.
Yeah, not French in heritage, just French in their mission from the LDS Church.
Stephen was a direct descendant of one of the high-ups in the Mormon Church, and they wanted to save him with everything in them.
Wow.
It was not easy to get away from him.
Well, fascinating.
And so was Tom and Linda.
Yep.
They were all connected to the higher-ups in the church, right up in Salt Lake City.
Yes, I would love to hear all the rest of the parts for Tom Lydier, but I'm sure if I get a chance to sit with Sylvia Stair,
yeah, she'll fill you in on that, and Linda, whatever.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it. I want to just thank you, Aunt Rhonita, for doing this. You filled a big, huge void of the history and the curiosity of the French missionaries, their excommunications, their dedication to Joel, the wives and the families they created, their investments in this town, into this community that we already still live under and don't know the story.
There was such an amazing spirit brought here by them, and their pureness and their desire to do right, live righteous lives, and have for their children and their posterity
a quality life.
Yeah, a quality life, and they were giving it their all.
Incredible. Amazing.
And their spirit came through so strong that we had the best conferences and the best life here. Like I said, who would come home from a mission and be so happy to see, their wives, they'd run down the street and swing them in circles and circles. It was, you'd almost think it was exaggerated, but it wasn't. It was true joy and true truth coming through. And their spirits were just so filled with love and thankfulness for finding the true work of God.
Amazing stories. Amazing. I'm so glad I got to capture this. I didn't know what I was getting into. I just know there was a big void that we needed to cover in, and there was something amazing happening that we didn't know nothing about. So thank you.
That's just the tip of the iceberg.
So thank you so much, Aunt Rhonita, for sharing and having this coffee chat. With endless, amazing details and everything. I want to just thank you off the bottom of my heart, and I look so forward to sharing this story with everyone. I'm sure they're going to be fascinated with everything you shared.
I think, Richie, you did such a beautiful job with the Stubbs legacy that I had the confidence to share this story with you. Otherwise, I definitely wouldn't have. I haven't shared it with even my own children, parts of it. And the spirit just isn't there to share with someone who's not wanting to hear it. And I feel that you do have a desire to understand and know that, and I feel like their story does need to be told and shared.
It's an incredibly significant story. Mm-hmm. And I think...
and we don't realize that most of the people don't even have a clue as to, like you said, who they are.
So I'm glad I get to feel a little bit of this void of the history for the new generations that don't know anything about it.
Well, hopefully it was all truth.
No, I mean, it's your side of it.
It's my view.
Even if it's not extremely accurate, this is your memory. And
that's my memory.
That's all we care about.
That is questionable too, so at this stage.
Well, thank you so much. We bring to a close the coffee chat with Rhonita Stubbs Jensen. Correct.
Tucker. Don't leave Tucker out. My soulmate.
Tucker Jensen, absolutely. Who shares the story of the French missionaries being married to the love of her life, a missionary of the LDS Church to France, and of course involved completely with Joel's work in the colony. Thank you, Aunt Rhonita. That brings us to a close. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll catch you guys here soon.
Wow.
Well, how about that? That is the most, one of the most amazing special moments I've had with Aunt Rhonita, opening her heart, her incredible memory. Such a beautiful soul lives within you, Aunt Rhonita. Thank you for opening up about that. And sharing your heart with us. For those listening, for all those that would like to share some of the other interesting things about the French missionaries, we would love to hear more. We would love to hear more sides. For those that would like to share, of course, let us know. We would love to hear more. As you can see, the French missionaries have impacted LeBaron in culture and history, and in our daily lives, we walk among their descendants. Amazing beauty that was brought to Joel's work there in LeBaron, and an amazing story that Aunt Rhonita shared. And even then, as you can hear, it's a fascinating story, and didn't even get to hear the more personal side of her romance with Bill, her challenges, all the things I got to hear. But still was amazingly fascinating just to capture the influence and the power that the French missionaries brought to Joel's work there in the community of LeBaron, and has affected all of our lives because we are friends, relatives, family with all of their amazing descendants. That's all I want to share. Thank you so much, Aunt Rhonita. Please help me clap for Aunt Rhonita with palms on the chat, palms everywhere. Bravo, bravo, bravo to one of the most amazing storytellers of our lives. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Esto ha sido una producción de El Chalán Radio Spot. Una producción por anfitrión Rhonita Stubbs. El Chalán Radio Spot consiste de un canal de música y un programa en vivo todos los viernes en la noche. Producida y dirigida para la comunidad de LeBaron y amistades en todo alrededor del mundo. Considere apoyar el trabajo de El Chalán Radio Spot con una donación que puede llevar a cabo en elchalanradiospot.com.